The screen is off. Silent. A relic of a different era. Now cut to January 2007. Steve Jobs stands on a stage in San Francisco, holding something the world has never seen before. The crowd roars with excitement. And then, flash forward. An empty Nokia factory floor. Machinery silent. Dust particles dancing in beams of light cutting through windows. Newspapers scattered across a desk, headlines screaming about collapse, failure, the end of an empire. In 2007, Nokia didn't just lead the mobile phone industry, they were the industry. Nearly half of every single phone sold on planet Earth carried their name. 150 countries trusted their brand. They seemed absolutely unstoppable, invincible. 6 years later, they were gone. But this isn't really a story about technology. It's not about processors or touchscreens or operating systems. This is a story about something far more dangerous, something that lives inside every single one of us. It's about the seductive belief that what made us great yesterday will automatically keep us great tomorrow. This is the rise and fall of Nokia and the psychology of ignoring change. To truly understand how Nokia fell, you first need to understand how high they climbed. Nokia wasn't always a phone company. Their story begins in 1865, in a small town in Finland. They started as a paper mill, just paper. Then they moved into rubber boots, then cables and wires. For over a century, Nokia was a company that kept reinventing itself, constantly adapting to survive. But in the 1990s, something revolutionary happened. Nokia saw an opportunity that most of the world was blind to. They realized that mobile phones weren't going to remain expensive toys for wealthy businessmen. They were going to become something else entirely. Something personal. Something for everyone. So Nokia did something radical. They made phones that reflected individual identity. The Nokia 3310 became iconic. It was practically indestructible. People joked you could hammer nails with it. It came with customizable covers in dozens of colors. It had Snake, the addictive little game that ate up countless hours of people's lives. And the battery? It lasted for days, not hours, sometimes a full week on a single charge. By the year 2000, Nokia had accomplished something extraordinary. They hadn't just built a successful product line. They'd built trust on a global scale. They'd built identity. When someone pulled out a Nokia phone, it meant something. It was reliable. It was cool. It was you. They became the most valuable brand in all of Europe. Imagine Nokia's headquarters in Finland during those glory days. Engineers high-fiving in hallways. Executives celebrating record-breaking sales quarters. Factory floors running 24 hours a day to keep up with demand. They were printing money. They were invincible. But here's where the psychology begins to shift. Success does something subtle and dangerous to human beings. It whispers a lie so sweet, so convincing, that it's almost impossible to resist. Success tells us we've figured it out, that we've cracked the secret code, that the rules that brought us here, those specific strategies, those particular approaches, are somehow permanent features of reality itself. And Nokia believed it. They believed they'd discovered the formula for eternal success in the mobile phone industry. They had no idea the ground was already shifting beneath their feet. January 9th, 2007. Macworld Conference in San Francisco. Steve Jobs walks onto the stage with his characteristic confidence, wearing his signature black turtleneck and jeans. He says 5 words that will change everything. Today, Apple reinvents the phone. The audience erupts. People are cheering, gasping, standing on their chairs trying to get a better view of this impossible device. A phone with no physical keyboard. A screen you control with your fingers. A computer in your pocket. But somewhere across the Atlantic Ocean, in Nokia's massive headquarters in Finland, the reaction was completely different. They laughed. Not with malice, not with mockery, with confidence. With the assurance that comes from a decade of domination. Nokia's executives looked at the iPhone and saw exactly what their years of experience told them to see. A beautiful toy. Wildly expensive at $600. No physical keyboard. How would people type? Battery life that was laughable compared to Nokia's phones. It was slow. Early reviews complained it dropped calls constantly. One Nokia engineer would later recall their internal reaction. We thought they were making a small tablet, not a serious phone. And here's the thing. Technically, they weren't completely wrong. The first iPhone was deeply flawed. It was objectively inferior to Nokia's phones in many measurable ways. But Nokia missed something absolutely crucial, something that would prove fatal. They were busy solving yesterday's problems: battery life, durability, call quality, physical keyboards, all the things that mattered in the old world. Apple was inventing tomorrow's desires: touch interfaces, apps, mobile internet, the feeling of holding the future in your hand. They were creating wants that people didn't even know they had yet. And then Google entered the game with Android, an open-source operating system that essentially said to every manufacturer on Earth, you too can build an iPhone competitor. Samsung jumped in, HTC, Motorola. The race was on. But Nokia? Nokia had Symbian, their own operating system. It had worked perfectly for years. It was reliable, battle-tested, proven in the market. Why would you abandon something that works? Why would you take that risk when you're sitting on top of the world? By 2010, the cracks were impossible to ignore. Nokia's phones were falling behind. They were slower, clunkier. The user interface felt dated. Customers were starting to drift away. But inside the company, something else was happening. Something that had nothing to do with technology and everything to do with human psychology.
This is where Nokia's story transforms from a business case study into something universal, a mirror that reflects something uncomfortable about all of us. Because what happened to Nokia wasn't really about technology, it was about the architecture of human psychology, about how our minds work when faced with disruption. Let's start with what business theorists call the innovator's dilemma. Nokia had spent years, decades, optimizing themselves for absolute perfection in a specific world. Their factories were marvels of efficiency, churning out millions of phones. Their supply chains were incredibly sophisticated. Their quality control was legendary. Their entire business model, from top to bottom, was built to manufacture reliable hardware phones better than anyone else on the planet. But here's the trap. The iPhone wasn't competing on reliability. It was competing on experience, on emotion, on the intangible feeling the device gave you when you held it, swiped it, showed it to your friends. The iPhone made people feel something. Nokia was answering questions nobody was asking anymore. Second, status quo bias. Human beings are neurologically wired to prefer the familiar. Change, even potentially beneficial change, activates threat responses in our brains. It feels dangerous. It feels like risk. And when you're already winning, when you're already on top, risk feels like everything. Risk feels like the only thing you could possibly lose. Nokia's leadership looked at the smartphone revolution and their brains told them, but we're winning. We're dominating. Why would we risk destroying what's working? They didn't realize the game itself had fundamentally changed. They were asking the right question about the wrong game. Third, ego and overconfidence. Success is intoxicating. It's more addictive than any drug. It makes us believe we're smarter than we are, that our judgment is somehow infallible, that our success was pure skill rather than skill, plus timing, plus luck, plus 1,000 other factors. Nokia had dominated for more than a decade. They'd faced competition before, serious competition from Motorola, from Ericsson, from Siemens, and they'd defeated every single challenger, crushed them. So when Apple arrived with their weird keyboardless phone, Nokia's response was psychologically predictable. We've seen this before. We've faced threats before. This is no different. Except it was different. It was completely, fundamentally, catastrophically different. Watch what happens next. Nokia's market share, which stood at 49% in 2007, begins to collapse. By 2010, it's half that. By 2013, it's barely 3%. 3%. Empty Nokia offices. Lights clicking off floor by floor. The Microsoft partnership that was supposed to save them, Windows Phone, fails spectacularly. By 2013, Nokia sells their entire mobile phone division to Microsoft for just $7.2 billion. Think about that number. A company that was once worth over $300 billion, reduced to a case study in business school textbooks. But here's the real tragedy, the part that haunts anyone who studies this story. Nokia knew. They actually knew change was coming. Their engineers were begging leadership to switch to Android. Internal reports were warning about the existential threat. The information was there. But knowing isn't enough. It's never enough. It's what you do with that knowledge that matters. And Nokia did what all of us do when change threatens to destroy what we've built, what we've spent years creating, what defines us. They delayed, they denied, they defended, until there was nothing left to defend. So what can we possibly learn from this? What's the takeaway beyond Nokia messed up? Nokia fell because they committed the most human of mistakes. They confused being right with staying relevant. They were right that the iPhone had serious flaws, right that their phones were more reliable, right that they had superior infrastructure, more experience, greater market share, deeper pockets. They were right about almost every specific fact, but they were catastrophically wrong about what mattered. The psychology that destroyed Nokia, it doesn't just live in boardrooms and corporate headquarters. It lives in all of us, every single day. It's the entrepreneur who built one successful business using a certain approach, and then tries to run the next business exactly the same way, refusing to adapt to a different market, different timing, different conditions. It's the professional who mastered their industry 10 or 15 years ago, then stopped learning, stopped evolving because they already knew how things worked. It's the person who defends their beliefs and opinions not because those beliefs are actually true or useful, but simply because they've held them for so long that abandoning them feels like losing part of themselves. Change doesn't care about your resume. It doesn't care about your track record. It doesn't care how brilliant you were yesterday, how successful you were last decade. Change only asks one simple, brutal question. Can you adapt? Look at Nokia's legacy now. Their phones are displayed in museums, artifacts of a bygone era. But interestingly, Nokia still exists. Not as a phone manufacturer, but as a telecommunications infrastructure company. They pivoted, they adapted, just too late to save their mobile empire. The companies that survive across generations aren't the ones with the best products. They're not even the ones with the most money or the smartest people. They're the ones willing to do something that feels almost impossible. Destroy what they built in order to build what comes next. And the same principle applies to us as individuals. What made you successful won't automatically keep you successful. The world doesn't reward those who defend what worked yesterday. It rewards those who adapt to what works today and anticipate what will work tomorrow. So here's the uncomfortable question Nokia's story forces us to ask ourselves. What change are you ignoring right now? What signal are you dismissing because it doesn't fit your experience? What threat are you laughing at because you're currently winning? What uncomfortable truth are you denying because accepting it would mean changing everything? Because somewhere out there, someone is doing what Nokia refused to do. They're listening. They're adapting. They're letting go of yesterday to grab hold of tomorrow. The choice is always ours. Stay with what's comfortable and familiar, or embrace the terrifying freedom of change. Nokia's empire fell because they chose comfort. What will you choose?